Is this the death of the middle-class bike shops? Oh wait, are there still middle-class bike shops? What is a middle-class bike shop? Well, we'll take a look of where the middle-class bike shops have appeared and where they're reemerging now. So with my 35 years of being in the industry, I'm going to show you where I came from Parker Bikes, which was a middle-class bike shop of the 90s, and what they are currently today, and how they are maybe thriving, not dying, or potentially. Well, we'll review that after this. Well, you may have not heard of the middle class bike shop because they're not as popular in today's economical situation in the bike industry, but they've been around for many of years before. In the 70s, the 80s, the 90s, and even guess what? The Wright brothers themselves were a middle class bike shop mechanics. Yeah, go figure. So they've been around for a long time. Well, in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, they were mainly comprised of mom and pop shops or smaller locations, 2, 3, 4 employees at best, and they carried multiple brands just to keep afloat. Variety was definitely the middle class bike shop's game plan for sure. Talking about entry-level family community bike shops, this is where the bike industry hasn't split off in several different niches, and it was a little bit simpler at times. Well, sometimes a little bit simpler. It's just as complicated today, but there are some other nuances that are actually add a little twist to our current market. But the middle class bike shop of yesteryear is basically like my parents' mom and pop shop. We had a few employees, we had a shop dog, we carried 3 or 4 lines, and we had multiple reps that got our basically goods from and actually sold them. The bike companies back then were actually supporting the independent bike dealers because that's the only way they actually moved their inventory. We had a pretty big shift in the early 2000s. What happened was the big manufacturers at the time really were going at it, and they decided to really kind of push the narrative in the bike shop world to become more concept shops. Concept shops was specifically mostly their brand and all their accessories because they've been building up their brands and all the accessories to go with it for the last, I would say, 10 years after the fall of Schwinn. Well, therefore, they took these independent bike dealers, and if they were big enough to take on the line, they were able to carry all the products, get all polished up and look great, and they basically had to ditch the other line if they were carrying both. So if you were a shop that wasn't doing as much volume and they had a shop that was coming in or soon to be, well, you basically lost that line. They were not very forgiving and loyal at all at this particular phase because they were splitting basically the market and actually upping the game of the concept stores. Well, if you were big enough at the time, like a few stores were, and they carried Trek and Specialized, they could basically tell both lines to go jump off a bridge and we're going to buy what we're going to buy because they did such a high volume. But most of the other shops fell into the camp of, well, we got to pick one or the other, which I worked at Cyclists, which we picked Trek. Our competition, Peloton, carried both lines and they carried Specialized. For example, this was the beginning of the end of the middle class bike shop. A lot of middle class bike shops that carried multiple lines, well, they had to pick either one or other or neither. So therefore, it made it a little more challenging with these particular shop strategy going forward. Not to say that some didn't survive, they did, but also there's the big hammer of direct-to-consumer sales. Well, performance is really kicking up their heels and getting in power. They were buying some other companies like Nashbar and actually getting ahead in some steam. So they were doing the direct-to-consumer before anybody else for sure. And also eBay became a living, breathing thing. This really kind of disrupted the actual whole market and it actually still does affect the market today. So before we get into where the current mom and pop middle class bike shops are today, well, we have to see what the industry is actually becoming. And we're going to start with the manufacturing. It does start from the top down in a lot of cases, and this is where it actually lies. So within the last 3 years, the big brands, Trek, Specialized, Giant, Pon, and various others, have actually had some serious hardships because they had a boom and a whiplash of low to no demand. Everything got undercut in price, and in addition to overstocked on the wrong inventory. This has put them in a really hard position. Alluded to that fact, 4 of them actually have retail stores, which they got rid of the concept store and just made their own stores. Trek Concept Stores, Specialized, it's actually owned by Specialized. Pond Holdings has Mike's Bikes, and Giant actually has some of their own stores as well. This has actually put a lot of stress on the market for the middle-class bike shops because they're competing against the upper end. But here is an interesting twist. Since these big companies have gone to direct-to-consumer and basically peddling their stuff on eBay, in addition to, with their locations, having all this footprint and retail space to deal with, they've actually put themselves in harm's way because the demand has dropped to nothing and they're no longer driving the market. What that means is basically what they say goes. Nobody's buying those 5,000, 10,000 bikes anymore, huh, buckaroo? So that leads to, yes, you guessed it, the collapse. The collapse of these big companies, actually they have not collapsed completely, but they're actually having some serious hardships. Layoffs, closing locations, shrinking down inventory by 40% that Trek released. They're all doing that. And they're actually streamlining their companies. Well, this is going to take time and trying to develop new relations within the actually overseas market that builds all their stuff, because let's face it, they're not building them themselves. They're dealing with Merida, Giant, other facilities. Trek, a lot of their bikes are coming from Cambodia, which is kind of a new one for me. But in any case, they're all going through these serious hardships. And yeah, they're not going to do very well for the next few years. So now we got you all caught up to speed of what the industry has done to itself. Well, the big boys anyway. The niche, yes, I said niche, mom and pop shops of the middle class of yesteryear is actually transformed into niche bike shops. What does that mean? Well, the bike industry is split up in so many different directions, like mountain bike, gravel, road, triathlete, you name it. There's probably another 10 I'm forgetting to say. But in any case, they all have a niche. They built up the actual lines on those particular niche because there was a demand for them, but their prices are way too high. Here, there lies the actually silver lining of the situation. A middle-class bike shop, if they just started up or they've been around for a while, they've identified their niche in their market. And the companies that they're carrying, well, they're going through some hardships. They're just going to be happy to sell anything. Therefore, they can go back to them and go, hey, we're not going to carry all that crap you're going to try to force down our throat. We're just going to only buy what we need and know what we can sell. And we're going to actually cater to our niche and community versus trying to push your narrative anymore. Because you have no longer the clout or the strength to do so. So with these niche bike shops, they've actually doubled down on a lot of service work. That's really been helping a lot of shops to keep along. And what I mean by that, doubling down. Aren't they doubling down already, is one comment in one of my videos. Well, they are, and what that really means is they're actually adding different kinds of services like waxing chains, detailing frames, bringing back some of the sent out services like suspension overhauls and so forth to be redone, in addition to really catering to the customer. They're really not doing that nickel and diming service rider approach of going to basically bleed you dry before you walk out the door. They're going to give you the warm hug, give some extra services on hopes that you can come back and return. Therefore, the service and the warm hug is actually finally taking a turn in the right direction. That allows the shops to build that community, bring in that brand trust, whatever they sell, in addition to, you guessed it, their shop trust, the people that they work with. They see the same faces and that kind of thing. Therefore, they can start building up their communities again by local rides, clinics, whatever they want to hit the desire for their particular niche. But there lies the silver lining. The niche is going to drive that middle-class bike shop. And the big corporations are no longer driving the niche. So what are you going to see in these middle-class bike shops? Well, you're going to find more specific price points, a little bit lower, maybe some used product. If they're really smart, they're really going heavy on used. And also used parts. Hey, there's so much stuff that's been produced in the last 30 years that, let's face it, you can find anything on Facebook Marketplace or Craigslist, strip it down, and sell the parts. And therefore, you have a big supply of used parts that go to specific bikes of vintage. Hey, I do this all day long. I have customers coming in. I do tune-ups and so forth. And like, oh, your shifter's dead. If I can't fix it, which is rare, but when I can't, I can find one probably either my own stock of used stuff or either on eBay that'll actually be a match to the vintage. And or lo and behold, you have a nice solid vintage machine versus a basically hodgepodge of parts of new, old, and whatever brand to match that shifting, gearing, or what have you. So there's a lot of things that the middle class bike shop has actually grown and basically doubled down on their niche as well as service as others. Some have done really well. I've seen some comments from some shops that have really just focused on that. We do really well on used market. We sell a lot of used bikes, and also we do a lot of good service. And what that does is brings the price point down. Well, that's the 90% of the actual market. It always has been. What Trek and Specialized Giant and Pond have been forcing is that little 8% or 5% and have been trying to balloon it to overcome the actually Walmart, Targets, Dick's Sporting Goods, any kind of sporting goods bikes and try to eat up that, because that is actually truly the biggest piece of the pie. Well, they are hurting so bad, it's going to be pushed back by price. Really? Yeah, that is actually not a shocker. But there's been some hardships in the way. I mean, there's been quite a few shops I've seen recently that basically didn't survive. Some of them have been around for a long time. Some of them just got tired and burned out and can't do it anymore. Some were just open in the last 5 to 10 years. And unfortunately, they were not seasoned enough to understand the whiplash of our industry. If you want to make $1 million in the cycling industry, you need to start off with 2. So therefore, it's not really a money maker. And a lot of people did know about this, but they didn't know the nuances of dealing with dealers and how they're going to force inventory on you. And basically, the ones I've seen were direct to point where the vendor forced a lot of inventory on them and then discounted it direct to consumer and then told them, well, we can't rebate you or give you better credit or anything of that nature because you bought it and it's yours now. They can't compete or sustain. I've seen several shops fail because of this. Unfortunately, they weren't big enough to adapt or actually had the experiences of what I've seen in years past. Unfortunately, the big four don't really have the independent bike dealer as their interest. They used to back in the 70s, 80s, 90s. And now they're still drinking the same Kool-Aid. Will this shift? I don't know. But what is going to shift is your homegrown middle-class bike shops that cater to 90% of the market are going to be there. They always have been, but not as many. But hopefully this will bring back the insurgent of that and actually forces those big brands to take a second look and go, hey, maybe we're missing an opportunity here. We need to go back to the good old days of they are our customers. Weird, right? So what are you going to see in your market from these homegrown middle-class bike shops? They're probably going to be smaller in footprint. They're not going to be in your major retail spaces. They're going to be tucked away in industrial parks because a lot of times everything's appointment-based now. Smaller, 1 or 2, 3 individuals are running the shops, even maybe go into a garage shop like mine. Well, therefore, that actually gives them opportunity to be healthier, provide better service, and let's just face it, bring back the community of the middle-class riders. Number one thing we're all trying to do is make sure you get into cycling and it's safe. That should be the undertone of everybody's or every bike shop's MO. But in any case, that's what we're looking at here. And I'm sure you can find a mechanic near you in your area that's doing something similar to this. In any case, there is a silver lining to this, and what I have foreseen in the next 3 to 5 years, a lot of these smaller shops, yeah, we can get insurance, yeah, we can get business license and do our thing, and yeah, and it's going to be a lot of appointment based, but you're going to get a higher level service and better quality at the end of the day, safer riding, and better for the community. What's going to happen to the Big Five? Well, who knows? They'll probably keep chewing over the same old stick that they've been doing for the last 10, 20 years. And guess what? That stick is getting smaller and smaller and smaller. Us little independent shops, we're going to be around, have been around, and guess what? We may be another, Wright Brothers. Come up with something new, fancy, and fly out of here. Hope you enjoyed what you saw here. And this is where the independent bike shops are going to prevail. And thanks for hanging out with me in the garage. If it's beautiful in your neck of the woods, please go for a ride. Until next time, have a wonderful day.